Hi, this is Braden Holtby.
Hey, this is Tanner the Bulldozer Bozer.
Hi, this is Brian Burke from Toronto, Ontario.
This is Daryl Sutter.
Hello, everyone. I'm Carly Agro from Sportsnet Central.
This is Jay Onright.
This is Quick Dick coming to you from Tofnell, Saskatchewan.
Hey, everybody. My name is Steele Fleury.
This is Kelly Rudy.
This is Corey Cross.
This is Wade Redden.
This is Jordan Tutu.
My name is Jim Pattison.
Hey, it's Ron McLean, Hockey Night in Canada and Rogers Hometown Hockey, and welcome to the Sean Newman Podcast.
Let's get on to your T-Bar 1 Tale of the Tape. Originally from Lloydminster, Alberta, Saskatchewan. Born in 1947, in 1966 he got his start in journalism at the Star Phoenix newspaper in Saskatoon. By 1973, he had joined CTV's Canada AM, and at age 26 was covering the Yom Kippur War. In 1989, he covered the Tiananmen Square protests, and in 1995, he joined Dateline, where he's been for the past 25 years. He's made appearances on Seinfeld, and Bill Hader does parodies of Keith on Saturday Night Live. He has been active for 53 years now of award-winning journalism. I'm talking about Keith Morrison. So Keith, take it away.
Hello, Lloydminster. This is Keith Morrison, and welcome to the Sean Newman Podcast.
Well, welcome to the Sean Newman Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Mr. Keith Morrison. So thank you, sir, for hopping on.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Now, you have to solve a question for me. When COVID first hit, or maybe even a little bit before that, we got talking about notable people from Lloydminster. I'm from Lloydminster, and your name came up. And I've listened to lots of interviews where you say you're from Saskatoon, and I've read about 1,000 news articles that says you're from Lloydminster. So I'm putting you on the spot. I'm making you choose.
Well, I was born the day my parents moved to Lloydminster from a little town outside Lloydminster. Where were they anyway? Vermilion or something? Anyway, they were. They moved to Lloydminster in July of I remember the year, and I was born that very day. There was a storm apparently, and my dad drove my mother to the hospital while the rain and the hail were raging down, and I got born.
Interesting. I know in doing the math, I think it's 1947 when you're in there, but 1950.
Right.
I hate to date you. I didn't mean to do that to you.
People do it all the time.
Well, 1958, you're in Saskatoon, so it's not like you're in Lloyd for a huge chunk of time.
We moved around a bit. Yeah, it's true.
You come from a family of you were in the United Church. Your dad was a preacher, and actually, if I'm correct, your uncles were preachers. Is that true?
A number of them were, yes, indeed. Yeah, it was a preacher family. My grandfather was, that is my dad's dad. My dad was the eldest of 10 kids, and there were 8 brothers. I can't remember how many exactly, but they kind of went into the ministerhood. And there is still the one surviving brother still lives in Saskatoon.
Really? So do you come back to Saskatoon every once in a while then?
Every once in a while. I have a sister there. My little sister lives in town, and her kids and her grandchildren. So I come back once in a while to see them. I almost did a story in Saskatoon last year, and we were all set up to do it, and then COVID intervened, so it didn't happen.
Well, that's pretty much shut down the world, hasn't it?
Pretty much, yeah.
You in the interviews of you, I've read that you talk about your father as giving you the storytelling ability, and that your mother impressed the importance of cadence. Is that what they passed along to you?
Yeah, probably, or a little of both, or each, or something. I don't know. People ask these questions. I don't know. You answer what you think is best, but yes, my dad was a natural preacher. He was a storyteller. He wasn't a bombastic guy, not at all. The reverse of that. But it was kind of spellbinding to listen to him. listened to him talk, and you kind of waited to hear what he was going to say next. And you know, my mother knew the rules of music as well as anybody. She was trained by the best academies in the Toronto Conservatory, I think it was. So when she was teaching you and when she was leading the choir, she had a very definite idea of how to express the emotions of whatever it was you were singing, and the meaning of it all. And she drilled that into us all the time. So yeah, all these things contribute.
Did you grow up singing then in the choir?
Yes, man. It was a big part of our lives.
How about, I know you went to the U of S. I think you dropped out. Did you drop out of the U of S?
If a young man is walking along a cliff face and he's walking beside his professor and he winds up at the bottom of the cliff, would you think he was pushed or did he fall? I departed the U of S after a fairly short period of time.
For the best, then?
Probably, I don't know. Who knows what turns life?
Come on. Look at where you are right now.
I knock on wood, I've been a very, very lucky guy. Life can go so many different directions, you just never know, right? Now, I would tell any kid growing up, for God's sake, go to college. But
and yet you didn't.
Back then, in the late 60s, if you a lot of kids dropped out of college or flunked out or something, and many of them did okay. Many of them did very well, because it wasn't such a crucial thing in those days. And I don't know that it should be now, but it is.
Did you, you come out of school, you're not graduating. Lots of people go back to the family business. And the family business for you would have been the church.
Yeah. Well, I was just kind of drifting along after this. And that was not a long period of time. And by the way, there's an organization in Saskatchewan called, it used to be when I was a kid, called the Tuxas and Older Boys Parliament. And now it's, I don't know whether it's Saskatchewan Youth Parliament or something like that. It's a mock parliament.
Okay.
And then, again, don't know what they do now, but then every year at Christmas time, we'd have a week-long parliamentary session where we'd get together, we'd debate whatever issues we, decided to. We had resolutions and officials of the parliament. So that was something that I was very much involved in right around the time I was supposed to be studying for various college exams. And, probably part of the reason I didn't do so well in my exams was because I was the premier of that parliament. And it occupied a tremendous amount of time. So I went to all the towns around Saskatchewan, and we have little constituent assemblies and had our own little mini mock parliaments on the weekends. And so I was doing that kind of thing. I had a wonderful time. I enjoyed it immensely. But I think people were beginning to wonder, is this kid ever going to do anything with himself for real? So, my dad suggested that they were looking for people, having trouble finding student minister fill-ins that summer in various really tiny towns around the province to, do the duties of the local United Church minister. And I did that for that summer. And it was certainly a very interesting experience. It made me realize that line of work is a lot more complex, difficult, and stressful than I was aware it was.
So you're saying, just so I hear this correctly, at one point you were seeking maybe a life in politics because you were in this, or was it just fun to do that?
It was. It was a teenage and youthful fantasy. You remember Tommy Douglas was premier, and then Woodrow Lloyd, and political issues were very, very front and center in Saskatchewan. Really, the province was front and center in some of the progressive politics of the day. First Medicare program on the continent, the one that inspired the Canadian program. A very active political scene. And I think as a kid growing up, I was just really attracted to that. I didn't know whether I'd go into politics, but it always interested me. You never know. It came close a couple of times, but never really got there.
That would have been an interesting thought, Keith Morrison, the politician.
It would have been a terrible one.
Going back to preaching then, or being a student minister, I should say, you talk about stress. What stress comes? Are you talking about talking in front of people is stressful? Which, I mean, comes with its own terrors, I'm sure.
We're living in a very divisive time, and I'm, of course, south of the border these days. And boy, if you think divisive, come here and see what divided really is. But that's always been the case. People always have their opinions, and they always vary. And if you go to a small rural church on a Sunday morning, and you're giving a sermon that feels like normal stuff to you, because stuff that you picked up when you were, when you were going to seminars at the university, or when you were in discussions with other groups of people in Saskatoon, and you take that into a place like Disley, and you talk to a bunch of guys who farm for a living, dryland farming, very independent, very kind of, rely on yourself sort of work. And you repeat some of that stuff. I mean, come on. So there was that. Also, and I don't know, maybe you read this story somewhere, but one of the first things that happened when I got there was one of these elderly farmers died. And I helped with the funeral, and found myself one day being the one who was there for the widow, woman in her late 70s or early 80s, who had just lost her husband of many, many, many years. And I realized that she is sort of relying on me to be some kind of spiritual advisor to her. And, I could not know what she knew in 5 lifetimes. She was a very wise and lived-in woman. And I thought, who am I trying to kid here? I don't know what I'm doing. So, and besides, you either have to believe strenuously or don't get into the business.
It's an interesting thought. I look at you. I'm 34, and you, sir, have lived interesting life, and your career has taken you to places that most, I would argue, I don't know, what's the percentage? 99% of people have never seen. Just on the front line of some different events, some major events in the last.
Yeah.
What have you been in politics, in journalism, last 50 years?
Yeah.
And
53.
so
53.
Well, I look at you, and the way you talk about the older woman, not that anyone's died, but I look at you and I go, there's some wisdom to be pulled from you, because you've lived and seen things that most people can't even imagine.
Yeah. I've been very, very lucky that way. Lots of experiences. And they can make you feel exhilarated. They can make you sad. They can make you hopeful for humanity. They can make you despair. And they have in all cases. But has it made me any wiser? I don't know. You watch it go by. And then some 20-year-old comes along and says, no, you got it all wrong. Here's what you have to do. And now you get it.
And it carries on, and the song and dance goes on.
Yeah, truly.
Oops.
Visitor here. Sure.
Yes.
Sorry. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm all good.
All right.
I'm
Thank
all
you.
good.
Good.
No, as I told Dominique, you can't like, this is pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie. This is it took Jordan Gilroy. Huge shout out to him. He's a guy who's one of your diehard fans.
Oh, that's nice.
He's the one who put me onto the case that you're from Lloyd. I had no idea. Like, I had no idea. And without him and him pushing me, I would have never started the process of seeing if I could get you to come on here. And it's been, probably been since the start of the year, off and on 30 some emails, maybe more. And to have you sit across from me,
oh my God,
is like a huge honor.
Many emails, but it's nice to talk. Yeah.
It's everybody apologizes for it, which is cool. But honestly, it's if all of a sudden I just texted in and got you the first time, it may have, there was some work put into this. And this is a super, super cool experience. So for me, sitting on this side, I've only been doing this for about a year and a half, and been talking to different people and digging into their stories. And it's been a lot of fun.
It's a great thing to do. Yeah. But it must be fascinating, truly.
It is. You get to dig into people's stories all the time. Yeah. I'm sure there has to be some that just stick out immediately. Oh,
there are. Yeah. Lots and lots of them. you lose count after a while, but yes, there are some.
Well, if you look back through your journey, there has to be, you say you lose count, but if you look back, there has to still be one or two that maybe changed the way you thought.
Well, I just this morning woke up to an email about a woman named Jennifer Doudna, who is a chemist based in California, invented or co-invented, I guess you could say, a technology called CRISPR, the gene splicing technology, which is allowing all kinds of amazing things to occur in health sciences all around the world. And so we did a story on her a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, I think it was, when she had just got her process developed, and other scientists were kind of piling on and figuring out how they could do things too. And we're going after all kinds of long-standing problems, thinking, maybe we can finally solve this. Maybe we can finally, solve cystic fibrosis, or figure out how to make mosquitoes non-malarial, or all kinds of problems that were being addressed. This is a big deal. Well, today I wake up to find that she's won the Nobel Prize.
Wow.
But I recall that as one of the truly amazing conversations that I was able to have with this woman, who was just very open and accessible and talkable to. She wasn't highfalutin. She didn't use words I couldn't understand. And then you go to the other end, and I did numbers of stories with Jack LaLanne, the exercise guru. I didn't see him growing up very much because, in Saskatchewan then, and Lloydminster, we didn't have television anyway, but if we did, we still wouldn't have seen him, I don't think. But he was very big on American television screens and world famous. And just the coolest guy. But I did a story about him just about every birthday as he got into his 80s and into his 90s for Dateline. It was wonderful. Just became a really marvelous friend. So things like that. Yeah, and then some things that make you really worry about the human condition a lot, and stew about it. Like, we followed for a number of years. There was, back in the 90s, I'm not sure they still have it now, a kind of an annual peace camp in which they bring Palestinians and Israeli kids into a camp in the US somewhere, and they all get together and they learn how to live with each other, and they talk about their issues and their problems. They go home with a commitment to see if they can do something to help the peace process. And they were so hopeful, and they were so on board for the first few years. And we just watched them over a period of time as they gradually got hardened into their positions on either side of a very angry line. And it was it was one of the saddest things ever. So there's that kind of human behavior. And then there's the other kind that make you think, wow, we're a pretty amazing species. And it's everything in between.
With roughly 10 minutes to go, I better squeeze in a Jordan question because he'll kill me if I don't. You worked a lot of years on both sides of the border.
Uh-huh.
A lot of years in Canada. A very successful career in Canada. And then you go down south, and I mean, case in point, I mean, you've Grace Seinfeld, which might be, you want to get in a divisive. People might argue it's the best, and I'm sure that others will argue a different show. But you've graced the screen of Seinfeld. You've had everybody knows the Saturday Night Live spoofs of you in good humor, I think. And but what would you say was maybe the toughest thing from going from Canada to the United States?
Well, you moved around yourself a lot, I know, and
yeah,
and played hockey in the States for a time.
Yeah.
So I went I was a co-host with Barbara Frum of the Journal on the CBC, the state old mother corporation, and she was the iconic Canadian journalist, like sort of little clouds around her head. She was so idolized, and respected. And then I went from there to kind of, if it bleeds, it leads, television news in Los Angeles. It was an enormous cultural change, enormous. And maybe I saw the most extreme of it. But ever since that change, it's been totally clear to me that these are two entirely different countries. The character of the people, I find, is completely different. It's Canada used to worry so much. I don't know if they do anymore, Canadians, but worry that somehow they were getting to be too much like America. The blending. I'm talking about an issue from years ago.
Yeah.
That was the worry. But boy, that's not something to have to worry about, I'll tell you.
Well, I tell you what, social media now has made every issue frontline and center on your phone, which means it can get to everyone. Everybody knows about it.
Sure.
And yet, it hasn't become any clearer.
No.
It's become more confusing.
Yeah. More confusing, more angry, more divisive. Yeah. And there was a guy, one of the people I met along the way, who was absolutely fascinating. Had several chances to talk to him over the years. Neil Postman, I guess he was considered a sort of a technology guru, that is to say, a commentator on technological change. And he was most active really before the development of social media. It was the early days of computering, actually, in the 80s and in the 90s. And he wrote a book called Amusing Ourselves to Death, which was really more about television. But he used to say that for every positive thing we get from a new technology, we get a negative thing, which is equal and opposite. And the cumulative effect of it is that, yes, we invent these technologies, but we don't use the technologies. They use us. We become creatures of our tools. So, that iPhone or whatever kind of phone you use, you find indispensable. You think that's my tool to operate in the world. But really, that tool is making you a different kind of creature than you were before you got it. And it's making you do all kinds of different things. Now, some of them are very positive, like the show you're doing right now. Some of them are what you've already described, that it's making things more confusing, that it's driving people apart. So, but the technology itself is what's causing this. We're not doing it ourselves. We are doing it, but we're doing it because of the technology.
Yeah, if you remove the technology.
I don't know. I think I think what he was saying, and what you kind of see these days, is that we're sort of helpless to this technology. It comes along and it changes us.
That's it. Well, that's bang on. That's extremely pertinent to what's going on right now. I mean, like, I'd read an interesting story about you, just where you were at the time of the O.J. Simpson back in 1994 and the helicopter and everything else.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could share that story with my listeners.
Well, are you talking about the slow car chase?
Yes.
Yeah. I had actually just left. I was doing Canada AM at that point. I left Los Angeles, moved back to Toronto.
You were in Toronto at that time?
Yes, I'd moved back to do Canada. I'd moved back to do Canada AM.
Canada AM.
Yeah, and but I was very fresh from Los Angeles, and I'm looking at this thing, and I know that all the people involved who are doing this coverage. I know the guy in the helicopter. I know the people on the ground. I know what the attitude of the people in the newsroom would be, and that's a technological story, because it would not have been possible to cover that story the way it was covered had it not been for the technological advance in the cameras that are put on the bottoms of helicopters, the ability of those helicopters to hover at a certain distance, the fact that television had changed, just the economics of television had changed because of technological change, to the point where you could go on the air and be on the air for an hour and a half, 2 hours. It didn't matter what. If it was a dramatic thing, you didn't have to break away. Before that, you had, every day there'd be a newscast and there'd be a 2-minute or a minute and a half story in the middle of the news about something big that happened that day, because they didn't have the technological ability or the commercial availability to make it go long.
You had to do it.
The beginning of that new era was the O.J. Simpson's slow car chase.
Do you remember seeing that and just being like, what is going on?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
I mean,
and then after, of course, they didn't want to do anything but car chases down the freeway. Until everybody got bored with it. Yeah.
Well, we're slowly closing in on time here. So I want to, I do a little segment at the end. It's usually the Crude Master final 5. We'll see how many we get out before time spits us out. Okay.
All right. Sure.
They're nice and quick. Long as you want to go. As long as
Okay.
Dominique doesn't shut us down, I think we're fine.
All right, fine.
You've had the opportunity to sit down and go places and talk to people.
Uh-huh.
Who's one person you would like to sit down like this and pick their brain?
Oh, my. Do I have to choose?
You can choose multiple if you like.
I like people who I like talking to people who really think deeply about things, and who maybe, aren't even thinking about current events, or aren't not necessarily, certainly probably not a politician. You're never going to get a very honest, long, deep conversation from a politician, because they're all worried about what they say and how people perceive it. But people who are interested in deeper philosophical issues, I'm not going to pick any out in particular, but yeah.
In the beginning, when you did interviews all over the place, who was the one interviewee who made you a little nervous?
Pierre Trudeau, without a doubt. He scared me half to death when I interviewed him. And I think I blew the interview pretty badly. I interviewed him several times, but I'm thinking of one in particular because I was just nervous. So, and my wife had worked with him, and she happened to come along that day. They hadn't seen each other for years. And when I did this interview, it was after he retired. And so she came and sat in the back of the room. And he walked in, saw her there, saw me there, sitting ready to do the interview. And he got this sort of grin on his face. And he came in and he sat down, turned around, he looked at her, made pleasantries, said hello. And the look on his face as he turned to look at me again was, I'm going to eat you alive, boy, just to show off to your wife. And it was quite an interview.
Speaking of your wife,
Yeah.
I read a news clipping that said the first time you ever saw her was on a video clip, and you kept replaying it.
Yeah, it's true.
So you do. So Mr. Keith Morrison believes in love at first sight, then?
Yes, is in fact. I mean, if you're very lucky, and luck comes with its complications. Nothing is ever easy or unruffled by side issues. But yes, I totally do. I mean, if you know, you know.
I would say probably nothing in life should be that easy. It's always better when you got to work for it.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Your final one. Seneca once said, "Time discovers truth." As we said in the beginning, you've been reporting for over 50 years, 53. What's the truth you've discovered?
We all die in the end. Or as my grandfather used to say, there'll be money when we're all dead. Don't worry about it.
Well, I really appreciate you making some time today for me. This has been, something off the bucket list for me. So I appreciate you making some time.
I'm delighted to have talked to you. Thank you. You asked good questions.
Thank you. Hey, folks, thanks again for joining us today. If you just stumbled on the show and like what you hear, please click subscribe. Remember, every Monday and Wednesday, a new guest will be sitting down to share their story. The Sean Newman Podcast is available for free on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever else you find your podcast fix. Until next time.